Peter Charles here of Hooked for Life Fly Fishing, and welcome to our local fishing show. I'm out here on the Grand River today, close to Caledonia, and I'm going out for some steelhead. We'll see how we do. Now, right today I'm using a large two-handed fly rod, and we're going to see if they'll take a fly today. Whoa. That was a hell of a hit. A really, really hard yank. When you have a steelhead hit like that, I'm going to let it sit on the dangle for a second or two. And then I'm just going to back up slowly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that fly back down to that fish. Give it a minute to forget the fly. Don't rush it. And hopefully it'll take it the second time. That was a very hard hit, but no hookup. So we have a chance that it'll come back and have another whack at it. Now what I'm doing here is I'm casting across the current and downstream, roughly a 45-degree angle. And that brings the fly across in front of the fish very slowly. Now, what's interesting is I can do exactly the same thing with a spinning rod and a soft plastic swim bait. And I've done that. I've caught fish in here doing exactly the same thing. I use a soft plastic swim bait, a steelhead rod, and I cast it out at a 45-degree angle and let it come across. So whether you're using a spinning rod or a fly rod, you can do this. And it's a very effective technique, and it's a lot of fun. Because when the fish hit, I mean, you know it. Like that one just went whack. And there was no doubt there was a fish there. If that fish doesn't come back, I've marked my spot. I know where I was standing. I know where that fish is sitting. I'll work down the pool, and then I'll come back up top of the pool, change the fly, and go back down again and see if he'll take. Now I'm just working a short line here. I started off, I mean, I haven't only just got going. I mean, that fish hit on about my second or third cast. I'm just working a line out right now. I'm not even getting out to my full distance. And, just working a line out and the fish hit. I mean, it shows you should fish the water right in front of you and don't go immediately charging in and try to fish at max distance. Yeah, it doesn't look like he's going to come back for round two. That's encouraging though. I just starting to work the line out and I already had a fish hit. Steelhead fishing, especially when it's cold like it is today, it's plus 4 Celsius. So we gotta let the fly sit at the end of the swing. As that fly swings around, it'll sit down in the current, and we just have to let it sit there, let it percolate a little bit, let it soak. Because sometimes the steelhead will fall it across, and we just let it sit there, and then all of a sudden they'll whack it. Make a slow strip, see if you'll grab it. Nope. Now I'm just going to move on. Just going to go down a few feet and do it again. The water is clear today, so what I'm doing here is moving fairly aggressively down the pool. It doesn't matter if I'm using a spinning rod or a fly rod. If I'm going to use this swung technique, I got to step my way down the pool. I got to cover fresh water all the time. It is pointless fishing for steelhead with this technique and standing in one spot. You're not going to get very much. Now you notice when that fish hit, I did not set the hook. With the swung technique, the fish hook themselves. So if you try to set the hook, you're just yanking the fly away from them. Last time I was out here with a spinning rod, a couple of years ago, I was using a soft plastic swim bait, and I was doing exactly what I'm doing now. And the same rule applied. The fish hooked themselves. They would hit it aggressively, and they'd hook up, no trouble. Sometimes steelhead do this kind of, I call it a curiosity take. You know, they come up and they give it a little poke to see what it is. But They don't actually bite on it as if they're going to eat it. And that's why we miss a lot of fish, because they're just coming up and tapping it. So we're on the dangle here. I'll just make one slow strip, maybe a second one. See if a fish is willing to come up and grab it. If not, I'll take a step. Strip in my line and make another cast. The rod I'm using today is a 13.5 foot fly rod. It's an 8 weight. And I'm using a shooting head system on the front end of it with a sink tip. And the idea behind that is to get the fly down where the fish are. You don't want the fly coming across really high up. Chances are the fish won't go for it. You have to get the fly close to them. And the same would be true if you're using a soft plastic swim bait. Now, the thing is, you don't want to be too low. If you're swinging the fly or the swim bait right at their face, they'll flee. They'll swim away. That's not natural. A prey item doesn't chase a predator. Now, this time of year, probably won't encounter any bass in here. Can't say for sure, because I have hit the odd bass at this time of year, but usually not. But you will find walleye in here. So when I'm swinging for steelhead on the Grand River, I'll also get into some walleye. And earlier in the season, I'll get into bass and maybe one or two other species as well. Now, steelhead are actually a migratory rainbow trout. They were originally transplanted from the Pacific West Coast in the 1800s, in the early 1900s. And steelhead in their native habitat live in the ocean, but they come up the rivers to spawn. So what they do here in the Great Lakes, they use the Great Lakes as the ocean. And they spend most of their lives in the Great Lakes. And then either in the fall or through the winter into the spring, they'll migrate up the river to spawn in the spring. And they need cold, clear, well-oxygenated streams in which to successfully breed. If the streams get too low or too warm, the fish die, and that affects the quality of the run that we have. Now, thanks to climate change, we're getting hotter and drier summers. That's making it tougher on these fish to survive. If you're going to fish for steelhead, you really have to get out when the water's cold. Yeah, we can catch them in September when the water's a little warmer, but I've always had better success as the water temperatures drop. And so, of course, that means we have to be well dressed. Good waders, good boots, and good warm clothing to wear underneath our waders. It's no fun when you get out here and you're freezing cold. Right now it's, as I say, it's +4 and I'm perfectly comfortable. If you're going to come out and fish for steelhead in the Grand River, it's not a high percentage thing. You're not going to come out here and get 10 fish. Maybe a fluke if you did. If you get one fish, that's a good day. But the one makes up for it. I mean, these are tremendous fish. When you hook them, they're fantastic. They fight fantastic. They're really strong. And they really test your tackle. Now, the Grand River can be a bit of a difficult river to figure out because it's quite broad below Caledonia, and the runs are not always clearly defined. Where I'm fishing right now, a lot of people would walk right by it. It doesn't look like anything. So it does help to have some local knowledge, somebody to give you a hand to know where to fish. Another way to do it is to come out when the water is very low and clear, midsummer for example, and spend some time walking around. I mean, you can do it in just a pair of wet shoes and a pair of shorts and just walk around and make note of where the deep water is. Another little thing to note, if you're fishing for bass in the summer and you're catching a lot of bass in one spot, that's a good spot to come back to in the fall when you're looking for steelhead. They often hang in the same water. This is the part of the pool where I really start to get antsy. This is where I know the fish are. This is where they really like to hold. I do fish further up because, as we saw today, there can be a fish there. But this is the heart of it right here. And this is where I get that delicious anticipation of that whack. I just felt something there. I'm not sure if it just bumped a rock or the fish tapped it. I'll just give that one strip. Another one. That was a fish. Wasn't much of a tap. It's amazing. These fish are quite big. You know, I've caught them in the Grand River between 10 and 12 pounds. And sometimes they just come up and give the fly the tiniest little tap. And you think to yourself, how can such a big fish, you know, give a fly just a little tiny poke? And then you come back and you cast back in the same spot, and there we go, got him. Got one. Whoa, 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 whoa. These are powerful fish. If they start to, oh, he's off. Shoot. I was just about to say, when they start to run, you gotta let them go. You gotta let them run, and I was letting him run, but he got off anyway. Let me just check my fly to make sure it's okay. Well, at least we hooked up one. That's an improvement. So we've missed one, lost one. There's the fly we're using today. Black and chartreuse. And this has been a very effective pattern for me over the years. I've caught a lot of steelhead on this fly. I have a website, hookedforlife.ca. So if you want to see how this fly is tied, I have a YouTube video on it. Now, I'm going to stay in the same spot where I just hooked that fish. I'm not going to keep going downstream, because I'm going to start working line back out. Because I hooked that fish and it started to fight, it can stir up other fish that might be in the run and move them around. Now I'm getting back into the heart of the run. This is the deepest spot in the run. It's the area with the smoothest current, and it's the place where fish are most likely to hold. Steelhead are migrating. They're not sitting there feeding. They're working their way up the river to find those little cold water streams where they can spawn. And so when they're making their way up the river, they need a spot to rest, to hold. And they need that deep water, and they don't want the current too fast, because if they're resting, they don't want to be swimming like mad to keep their position. So if you're looking at deeper, slower water in this time of year when the water's cold, that's where you're most likely to find them. So if you come out to the river and you're not sure what's deep and what's shallow, look for the color changes. And when you get out and start wading, you can see that often the dark water is often the shallowest, because you're looking at the dark rocks. And then as the water gets deeper, it actually gets a tad lighter. So we ended up with one fish missed and one fish hooked up and lost. You know what? For steelheading, that's a pretty good day. I mean, if I was fishing for my supper, it would be a little different, but I'm not. I'm fishing for fun. Okay, that's actually a great day. Love it. It's not too windy, it's not too cold. Fish were willing. Can't ask for much better. That's steelheading. So remember, if you're going to come out and fish in the middle of the river, look for steelhead when it's in November, December. Dress well, dress warmly, have good waders, and be patient, take your time. And when you get that one fish, I mean, that's all that matters. One is all we're looking for. It's never about the numbers, it's about the fun. So anyway, I'm gonna get back to the car, get my gear off, and find a nice place to get a warm cup of coffee. Peter Charles, Hooked for Life Fly Fishing, our local fishing show. Cheers.